That's how we do it in the South.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to Rabbit's Used Cars. This is a question I get asked probably 10 times a month. And I know we got a lot of new guys, a lot of flippers and stuff in the crowd, and a little food for thought. Rob, what's it cost to become a car dealer? What's it, what does it take? And I'll keep in mind every state's a little different, but they're all pretty much the same stuff, give or take. And literally, as I renewed my dealer's insurance the other week, that made me think, you know what? No one told me how to do this. And I started adding it up. And this is just a little food for thought. It's kind of interesting on the backside of this. Everybody sees the cars, but that's really a small part of the puzzle. So, you know what? You got a few flips under your belt. I'm going to be a car dealer, wheeler dealer. I want to be that guy. And that's cool, and I love it. There's nothing more I love than seeing someone take that step into being self-employed, to owning your own business. I love it. But you don't need to go into it blind. So we're going to kind of break it down for you. So first and foremost, almost any state you're going to get a dealer's license in the United States, you've got to take a dealer training course. Well, that's $300. So, all right, we got $300 invested, and you're going to get a little certificate saying you sat in your chair for 8 hours and listened to them talk to you. And they're going to tell you the ins and outs and things like that. You're thinking, okay, I can do that. Well, now you have to find somewhere to sell cars because, in some areas you can have a dealership and sell cars out of your front yard. In some states you can't. Some counties, municipalities you can, some you can't. So you got to have a piece of property to meet these guidelines. But usually the rules go, you have to have 100 square feet of office space. Inside that office space, you have to have a filing cabinet, a key lock box, a computer, and all your necessary forms. That's what you got to have inside that at least 100 square feet of office sales space. Well, now you have to have a display space. State of South Carolina, you have to have at least 2,500 square feet. Luckily, we have 2,500 square feet inside and way more than that outside. So that works out well here. But you got to think about that as well. You also have to have a sign that's visible to the public that they know that your primary business is selling cars at this location. So when they see Rabbit's Used Cars, that has to be in at least 6-inch letters and visible from the closest road. Okay, well, still not getting, crazy money or anything like that. We got to think, well, this location is going to cost you some money. And I don't know if you've looked at commercial real estate. It's pretty pricey. You got to realize, so I own this building, but like the other building, like leasing it. And which is a great way to start out. You don't need to go out and go into debt like that right off the bat. But even leasing, the biggest hole in the wall in the world, a couple grand a month, at least. And that's nothing fancy as a rule. And in some areas, are a little better than others for as far as leasing goes. But the other thing you got to think about is the area that you put your car lot in. Now, granted, the internet has opened this up a little bit for us. And this is not as important, but you don't want to be putting $500 saddles on $50 horses, if you catch my drift. So if you've got, let's use Greenville, for example. I was in Greenville for years, and I just know the numbers off the top of my head. The median income in Greenville is about 60,000 a year, which is decent. It's middle of the road. And we sold 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, $100,000 cars. But as a rule, most of our cars average 40 to 50 grand, give or take. So that works for our market locally. And we did sell a lot of cars locally. But the thing you got to think about, you may not be selling classic cars. You may be selling retail cars. So retail car wise, you obviously don't want to be selling Lamborghinis in a town with a $30,000 a year median income. So you got to think about that. And this is the other side of that. Well, you got to have insurance on this establishment. Well, you got to have dealer's insurance. And dealer's insurance is kind of a double-edged sword because not only does it cover the cars, but you also have to have a liability policy over the whole thing. And then this property that you just leased or rented, you need a rental policy that's going to cover everything else that's inside your little 100-square-foot office or warehouse or whatever, which way you want to do it. So now that's got to be insured. So you have these expenses for this. And I'm going to fill you in on a little secret between my surety bond, which I'll get into that here in just a second, dealer's insurance, insurance on the building, and the garage liability that goes with it. You're knocking 10K in the head. And I'll be honest with you, that number is pretty standard across the board. You may be a little cheaper in a certain area, you may be a little higher in certain areas, but around $10,000 a year just for your insurance. Keep in mind, we haven't sold a car yet. We got a building that's costing us $2,000 a month, and we just spent $10,000 for insurance. So now, month one, we're 12 in the hole. We haven't sold anything, and we don't even own a car yet. Now, not counting office furniture, computers, they don't give you that stuff. You got to buy that. So let's just go ahead and go on the low side, $3,500 for everything. Got to have a nice printer, and you got to buy your dealer forms, which we'll throw that in with the $3,500. So now we're $15,000, and we haven't sold a car yet. And I didn't include the price of the sign or anything, and I'm just keeping the numbers round. So now we're sitting about 15 grand in this, and we haven't sold one car yet. And keep in mind, next month's coming. That's another 2 grand that you're going to pay, and not counting your utilities. And that's the thing, people are like, oh, Rabbit, you're breaking it down too far. But no, you add that up. Yeah, that power bill that's $175 a month, over 12 months, that $175 adds up quick. And, got to have heat. Like I said, power. Internet, these are all add up. Trash disposal, these all add up. These are all eating out of your bottom line. And that's the thing that I explain to people a lot is you don't realize it, but just to get started and haven't sold one car or bought one car, and you're going to drop 50 grand. And that's on the cheap end, just to sell. Now, moving on to your cars. And I get this one a lot too. And whenever you go to your little dealer's class, they're going to tell you all about it because they're going to have people from companies there trying to sell you on this. It's called a floor plan. I am not a big fan of floor plans. They work for some people. I see a lot of pitfalls in these things. You got to be very, very, very careful while floor planning. Virtually 90% of new car dealerships are floor planned. And a lot of your larger used car dealerships are usually floor planned. And that works for them. I'm not real big on this concept. And you're like, well, what do you mean by floor planning? Floor planning basically is you're financing the cars you're selling, but it's a very short-term note. And usually, you can buy a 30-day float, a 60-day float, a 90-day float, but you need to sell that car no matter what. So if you buy this car for 10, you're going to pay a little bit of interest, and if you roll it, in 60 days or 30 days or whatever, but like the clock is ticking on these things. And, floor planning 3 or 4 cars for a car lot, ain't that big of a deal. You can keep up with that. But when you start floor planning all your cars, that's where you get into trouble because that's a pretty slippery slope and you got a floor plan payment. You know what I'm saying? They want their money. And you got to think about it. If you're making payments on cars that you aren't selling on top of all your other overhead, unless you're just independently wealthy going into this, you're going to be in the hole quick. I always stress this to people starting out in this business, that you need to start small. Oh man, I can floor plan, I got good credit, and everybody wants that car lot with 30 cars, 40 cars out front and be the man. You know what? I have so many friends that have little dirt floor car lots that have 5 cars sitting out front that make a great living. Just because you got a bunch of cars out front doesn't mean you're making money. I'll be honest with you, it's actually the polar opposite of that, because even if they're not floor planned, you're sitting on capital. So having a bunch of cars is not necessarily a good thing. Yeah, it looks impressive, but if they're not selling, that sucks. Another thing that I stress to people is starting small, is to really do your research on what you're going to sell. You got to understand, you need to do all this way before we got to any of these steps. But you really need to research what's selling. Have people ask me all the time, if you were going to start all over again, what would you start in? And one of my favorite fields that I think personally, and I still to this day, even in this economic climate, when things are sky high, when things are rock bottom in a recession, there's one thing I've always noticed sold is commercial vehicles. You got to understand, business keeps going. It may slow down, but it always keeps going. People are going to need goods and services. And goods and services have to have vehicles to either transport or to provide this service. And I stress to people all the time, in a sea, there's 7,000 car dealers in the state of South Carolina. There's probably less than 50 that are commercial dealers. And when I say commercial dealers, they sell work trucks, work vans, things of that nature. That, to me, is the best sales you can make in this business. And for several reasons. One is cost. Usually, work vehicles are base vehicles, so they're going to be fairly inexpensive. Another thing is buying them. You can go to an auction and buy work vehicles too. I mean, they run work trucks through, lease lines and things like that at the car sale. But another thing is you can actually go to auctions for like big companies, like, big telephone companies and power companies and utility companies that sell off fleets of vehicles. I'm talking about hundreds at a time. I mean, I used to go and buy them all the time, just like that from a big power company up in North Carolina. That's the thing. That's the way to buy those things, because they're all sold as is, right then, no calls, no nothing. Sold. And as a rule, fleet maintained, that's a double-edged sword. Some are better than others. You get some of them's the best truck you'll ever own. You get some, a little worse for wear. But that's where you get to where you're looking at what you're buying too. But that's the other thing about fleet vehicles, is they have less options. They usually, everything's got power windows now and things like that, but they're not loaded out with all these crazy options. So there's less stuff to give problems. They don't have fancy stereos in them. They don't have any of this, blind spot crap or any of that. They're simple. They're made to work. But that's something to remember. So that's the reason I always tell people to go into commercial stuff. So back to one thing I did miss, was talking about a surety bond. And I said, Rob, what's a surety bond? A surety bond is basically guarantees the deal to be whole. And when I say a deal to be whole is, people joke all the time, I'd never buy a car from a sleazy car dealer. No, I'd rather buy one from some dimwit in his front yard that, how about if it's a stolen car, which literally happened just yesterday. The same buddy that I was talking to, the other night or last night, went to go buy a car and the damn thing was stolen. They arrested the guy on the spot when he was there to buy it. Now, how about if he'd have been 30 minutes earlier? That's what a bond does for a licensed car dealer. If I flake, the deal falls through, there's money in place in that bond to make that deal whole. That's what you got to remember with that. And that's something else about being a dealer. We get a bad rap, but at the end of the day, cars are no cheaper if you buy them from an individual, you buy them from a dealer. There's a lot of fees and things like that you got to watch out for, but all in all that stuff's put into place to protect you, the buyer. But anyway, That's just my 2 cents. I hope I answered everybody's questions. And I'll tell you what, if you got any other questions about dealer's license, throw them down in the comments. We'd love to check them out. We'll answer as many as we can. Guys, we'll catch you next time at Rabbit's Used Cars.